This is exactly what to do if you feel like you've hit a plateau with your violin progress. If we haven't met, hi, I'm Megan. I'm a violinist and teacher. I've been playing the violin for over 20 years. I have my bachelor's and master's degrees in violin performance, and I'm Suzuki trained. If you're enjoying my videos, please just take a check-in to make sure you are subscribed to my channel. It's easy and it's free, and it really helps me out. If you're interested in working with me, you can check the description for a private lesson application, as well as my online comprehensive learning program, Learn Violin Online. LVO will be opening for enrollment in early 2026, so be sure to snag your spot on the wait list so you can be the first to know when the program does open and get exclusive behind the scenes. Feeling like you've hit a plateau with your violin progress can be extremely frustrating, especially if you feel like you're practicing, you're putting in the work, but you're just not seeing the results. In this video, I'll be telling you exactly what to do if you feel like you've hit a plateau and hopefully encourage you to keep going. So the first and I think most important thing to do when you feel like you are not improving is to ask yourself some honest questions about your practice routine. So the first question to ask yourself is, am I practicing consistently? So the thing about practice is that when you practice, you build up your muscle memory. And unfortunately, with muscle memory, if you don't use it, you lose it. So in other words, every day you don't practice, you are actually getting slightly worse, which I know can be a bit disheartening. So it's very important to practice consistently. I think the minimum to aim for is 5 days a week, although of course 6 and 7 are the goal. However, life happens, right? Life ebbs and flows. So if you aim to practice 7 days a week, but you only get in 5, I would say that's great. And certainly enough for progress. I've always said it's better to practice more often with shorter time than less often with longer time. So it's better to practice every day for 30 minutes rather than 2 hours one day on the weekend, because this will help keep your muscle memory going and give you the best results. So if your practice routine is not consistent, if you're not getting in a solid 5 days a week for several weeks in a row, then you're not going to be seeing progress. You haven't really hit a plateau. The next question to ask yourself is, are my practice routines effective? Now, there's a lot that goes into an effective practice session, but I think first is outlining the session, aka planning out what you're going to do, and then also establishing goals. So I'll leave another video linked in the description where I go more in depth on how to structure your practice session. But essentially, when you're going through your repertoire, you should break it down into sections and have specific goals for each section. This happens even before the practice session begins. This is one reason why I love using a practice journal. It's a great place to keep track of your goals. In addition to setting your goals, you need to make sure that you are using the correct and effective practice techniques. So for example, if you wanted to work on intonation in a certain passage, you would not practice that passage with the metronome because the metronome does not help you fix intonation. You might want to practice it with a tuner or a drone instead. Now, I understand that it's not always obvious on how to tackle a problem, which is why working with a teacher or going through an online program such as LVO that provides feedback can be super useful. But if you're not using a practice technique that directly targets what you're trying to improve, then obviously it's not going to improve. And finally, you need to assess yourself. You need to determine after the practice session if you met your goals. If so, yay, good for you. If not, why not? Maybe you didn't use the right practice technique. Maybe you didn't correctly diagnose the actual problem. There's all sorts of reasons. But if you are not planning out your practice session in this way, if you are not defining your goals, using the correct practice techniques to work on them, and then assessing yourself, then ultimately your practice is not effective and you are not going to be seeing that progress. So you haven't hit a plateau, you just need to learn how to practice better. If you feel like you are practicing consistently and that your practice sessions are effective and structured, then the third question you need to ask yourself is, am I practicing enough? So obviously the amount that you need to practice is different for everyone, and it varies by playing level as well. So a beginner is perfectly fine practicing, 15 to 20 minutes per day, but once you reach that intermediate stage, 15 to 20 minutes per day is just not going to cut it. So if you've recently leveled up, if you've recently started a new Suzuki book, if you've recently started learning a new skill like vibrato or shifting, you will need to add time to your practice sessions. Again, practice length is definitely personal, but a guideline is very beginner, like you just started within the last 3 months, 15 to 20 minutes, beginner, 30 minutes, intermediate, an hour, advanced, 2 hours plus. And if you want to become a professional musician, you should be practicing between 3 to 5 hours per day. So if you're practicing consistently, if your practice sessions are structured, you are practicing enough, then it's highly unlikely that you have actually hit a plateau. Progress on the violin can be very slow, and obviously the better you get, the slower the progress gets because what you're working on gets harder. So it could be that you improved really fast at the beginning when you were a beginner, but now you've gotten into more difficult things like shifting and vibrato, and you feel like it's taking a lot longer than usual. That's totally normal and doesn't mean you've hit a plateau. It just means you're getting into harder stuff that needs more time. Also, it can be really hard to truly assess progress within ourselves. Because we're with ourselves every day, we don't necessarily hear or see those little micro steps forward, which is another reason it can be really useful to have a teacher or a program that offers you feedback, such as LVO, to give you validation that yes, you are improving. In practice sessions, it's not always, mega leaps forward. Sometimes it's a micro step forward. Sometimes you feel like you've taken 2 steps backward. But as long as you have the practice routine stuff in check, you are overall making progress, I promise. A very valuable tool for assessing progress within yourself is recording yourself. Now, recording yourself every day or every practice session might not be the best for this because, again, there's always little micro steps forward and backward, but maybe every week, every other week can help you identify and see the progress that you're making. And every little small step is progress. Things that don't seem so huge are actually huge because they compound over time. So things like being able to play a passage like 2 clicks faster with a metronome, or being able to play like 2 more measures than you usually do without messing up are huge things, and again, will compound over time. Finally, if you are truly feeling stuck and getting frustrated, I think it's personally fine to step away from that certain piece or that certain technique for a little bit. Have you ever had the phenomenon where you don't practice for a day or 2 and then you come back and it seems like things are just working out better than before? Sometimes topics and pieces need a little bit to marinate in your brain. So if you can take a day or 2 break, or if you're really frustrated, maybe even longer, and then once you come back to the piece or the technique, I'm sure it will feel easier. Please keep in mind that this is not an easy instrument that we are pursuing. And even though the professionals make it look easy, it's not, and you are not alone in your struggles. Anything you've done or felt, I promise you I have too. I hope this was helpful, and please make sure you subscribe before you go.